We're going to go over how to simplify the chart of accounts with Microsoft Dynamics GP. The speakers today would be myself. I'm your account manager here at MIG. And Jacqueline Pride, she's our consultant. She's going to be conducting our webinar today. For audio controls, you can choose the Microsoft in the speakers, and you can use your computer. And there's an option for dial by phone, and that information is provided in the invitation we sent over to you. To submit questions, you guys will do it through the question panel, as you can see. And then at the end of the session, at the end of the webinar, we will have a Q&A session, and you guys will present your questions, and after that, we'll be happy to address them. So here is the agenda. We're going to talk about who we are. Then we're going to go over Microsoft Dynamics GP overview, implementing standard chart of accounts, the basics, chart of accounts feature and tools. Then we'll have our light demo, how to avoid issues, best practices, and we'll have at the end, as I mentioned, our Q&A session. Okay, so about us, MIG, we are experts in the implementation and support of leading financial and business applications from Microsoft. Our solutions are Microsoft Dynamics GP, Microsoft Dynamics SL, and Microsoft Dynamics CRM. We have been in business since 1998, and we assist organizations and companies to stream their business processes and to maximize their productivity. Here are our certifications. We are our Microsoft Gold Partner. We're recognized by the Microsoft community as a premier ERP reseller. And we also have a CPA National Registry, and basically for the people that want to have their CP credit, please email us and we will get that to you. Okay, so Microsoft Dynamics GP 2015 overview. We'll have Jackie Pride. As I mentioned, she's our consultant, and she's going to take over from now and go with the webinar.
Great. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you, Carolina. And I am pleased to offer up today for our webinar. We're going to cover a couple topics. One of those will just be an overview of 2015 for those of you who are not familiar with some of the new features. We'll touch on that rather quickly. And then we will jump into our chart of accounts discussion after that. So 2015, many of you may be familiar with these, but for those of you who aren't, you probably have heard of some of these, or maybe this will be your first look at it. But 2013 and 2015 both, we've seen a large emphasis by Microsoft on these topics. So identity management, very focused on having that single sign-on experience for Microsoft products and for the users, making it just a little bit easier. So for example, many of you know that back in the day when it was FRX, you had to have an FRX login, you had to have a GP login, you had to log into the network. And now with Management Reporter, that is part of your network login. It's part of Active Directory. So you don't really have to log into Management Reporter that very first time that you get logged into the system. You're ready to go. So you just launch Management Reporter. That's all part of that identity management. There's also been an emphasis on service-based architecture. Additional objects have been incorporated in Dynamics GP to enable the use of those GP functionalities across multiple platforms and multiple devices, and we'll talk about a few of those as well. This has really come about mostly for HR and payroll, for that self-service additions that have been added, but also for some reporting, and we're going to take a look at those in a few minutes. As a Microsoft certified trainer, I can't emphasize enough the simple to learn aspect of it. It makes my life so much easier. But for you folks out there in the audience listening in, if you have a responsibility for users within your finance department or within operations, obviously you want them to embrace your application, especially if it's a new implementation. And the best way to get people to embrace it is to make it easy for them to learn, easy for them to utilize. And as a Microsoft Certified Trainer, part of my job is helping people get over that bump, that learning curve. And for the folks that are used to using Microsoft products like Word and Excel, that experience within Dynamics GP is very similar. So they're easily able to learn how to navigate around. Very important, and they've made it even more so in 2013, 2015, keeping in touch with that Microsoft navigation. Also, it is very role-based, and the good news there, as the system continues to grow, homepage, as you continue to grow and the system continues to grow, the fact that it is a role-based allows you to push more people towards their home pages where the majority of their work will be done. And the home pages have been evolving for the last few releases, even more than that. And that enables people to stay focused on their functional areas and to stay within that particular module. Powerful business intelligence. We're going to talk about a few things, and those of you who have seen some of the demos, at least the demos that I do, I like to talk about Business Analyzer and some of the changes that have been made there that has enabled it to be pushed out to mobile devices. And again, that's kind of emphasized on that service-based architecture as well. But that business intelligence, we're all kind of geared towards, look at my phone, get the answers, look at the phone, Siri, tell me where the restaurant is. We need that also for GP from a reporting perspective to be able to look at our phone, our iPad, our Windows tablet, whatever that device happens to be. Desktop and web-enabled deployments. The last little benefit that I'm going to talk about is the fact that we now have this web client. And the web client for 2013 and 2015 has continued to grow, and we've added more functionality to the web client. If we could go to the next slide. Yeah. So here's some of the new features in 2015. And I've kind of lumped 2015 and R2 together and picked out my favorites. On the system side, for any of you controllers out there or any finance people, Management Reporter, the integration options have been taken out of that configuration console and been put into the company file to enable you to make a decision on, do I want this company to be integrated over to Management Reporter? Maybe there's a reason why you don't. Maybe you're collecting some information in a company, or it's a test company or something along those lines. You could to control that now. You do not have to go to IT, and IT does not have to log into that configuration console, which I always refer to as here, there be monsters, because it looks very confusing. It is truly a configuration console. But to make it easier on the finance people in the group, it's a checkbox. Do I want this company that I'm logged into to integrate to Management Reporter? On the system side, we also have the ability to copy home page settings from one user to another user, much easier. On the reporting side, I mentioned Business Analyzer, the new version. The thing that I just love, is the fact that they took that Business Analyzer functionality and now have pushed it out, not just to run on a Windows tablet or a Windows phone, but also to work on an Android device or any iOS application. So from the standpoint of really making it easier for users, it's not like you have to go out and get a Windows phone in order to get that functionality. Also, on the reporting side, they've continued to improve that report designer. And those of you in the audience who might be on 2013 right now know that we added a functionality called Report Designer that gave you the ability to create your own smart list. That was all well and good, but now in 2015 they've added on to that, and now we have the ability to also create refreshable Excel reports. And those of you who have gone through my training or perhaps through a demo know that I love, love, love the Excel reports. And if you haven't heard one of my little spiels, I would challenge you to make sure that in your company files that the Excel reports and the SSRS reports both have been deployed. There are over 200 refreshable Excel reports available to you. Also, navigation options for Management Reporter have been improved, so that web access for Management Reporter, there's a lot more options available to us. If we could take a look at the next slide, that would be awesome. On the general ledger side and fixed assets, here's something that's really great that came out. Enhanced voiding of intercompany journal entries. Those of you who do intercompany know exactly what I'm going to say when I mention voiding and intercompany journal entries in the same sentence. Historically, when we voided an intercompany journal entry, it did not void it in all the companies. We had to go into the individual companies and void the other half of that transaction. That is not at all efficient, above all, nor it also lends itself to one of those journal entries being missed, and then our intercompany account is out of balance. So in 2015, the voiding of intercompany journal entries now voids that transaction across all company databases. Awesome. GL batch approvals. This is something new. We haven't had this in the past. This is part of that workflow initiative. Some of you probably have seen that we've added requisitions on the payable side. We've added purchase order approval processing flows. Now we're expanding that out, and GL batch approvals is part of that. And as we go through the slides, you'll see that there are some other areas where we've added approvals, either on vendor master files or on batches. And for fixed assets, they finally added the year-end closing report. And those of you who have gone through the fixed asset year-end close know that historically in the past, you would say close the year and then nothing happened. There was like no report, no little pop-up window. Sometimes people would call me and say, I'm not really sure if it worked. I have no idea. There was no closure. So Microsoft has addressed that by creating a year-end closing report. Back to the web client and the architecture, we talked about that identity management. The web client, we've added invoicing functionality to that. We didn't have that in the first phases. And we've added Canadian payroll, if that is meaningful for anybody out there. And again, we already kind of talked about that service-based architecture, that ability to look at GP functionality across a number of devices. If we could go to the next slide. So what are some of the features for purchase order processing and payables? So again, I mentioned that we have approval processes now. We have added vendor approvals to the mix. And on the purchasing side, we're now able to edit emails for historical purchase orders to make corrections. On the payable side, we now have payables batch approval. This is going to get a little bit boring because in almost all the modules, we've added some kind of batch approval. I'll just give you the heads up. One of the best features that was added on the payable side is this enhanced payment terms. Now, historically, when I've done demos, if it's been for somebody who had kind of very specialized payment terms, there were many times when they would say, well, I can't quite get the payment terms that I need with the functionality that currently exists in GP. So now the payment terms have been rolled out, even bigger and better, and you have more criteria that you can base your terms on. Again, vendor approvals is part of that approval processing. And we now have a payables warning if we're trying to apply or trying to enter a voucher in when there's an open PO that exists for that particular vendor. And that's to prevent us from entering a voucher when, in fact, we really should be doing that three-way matching from the purchasing module itself. So it's just a little warning. It's not that you can't get past it. It's just a, hey, did you know this could be a problem. On the self-service side, this is where a lot of that, a lot of the architecture changes have come into play. We used to have business portal in the past. Now we have this employee self-service. So now employees can make changes to or take a view of their profile, their pay stubs, their W-4s, and their direct deposit information. So it's really, truly this kind of little portal. I hate to use the word portal because that's what we had before, but now we have that self-service capability where we can go in and take care of things for ourselves, and that's a great bonus for the payroll folks who don't have to go in and maintain that themselves, or worse yet, take the responsibility for putting in that direct deposit information, for example. On the receivables and the sales order processing side, again, we've added batch approvals for receivables, and the editing, we've also extended that into the sales side and the receivable side, so we can edit historical RM statements or receivables management statements, and we can edit emails for historical sales documents as well. So let's talk about simplifying our chart of accounts. So if we could, yeah, thank you, go to the next screen, and we'll stay here for a little bit, and we're going to talk about our main topic of the day, and that is our chart of accounts. And it is, of course, the foundation for all of GP processing, right? The very first thing that we do when we talk to people at the start of the implementation, we say, what does your chart of accounts look like? What do you want to get out of the system at the end of the day? That chart of accounts is truly the foundation for everything that happens in GP. It controls the level of detail brought over from the submodules into the GL and controls what data elements we can easily report on financially at a later date. So why would I want to update that? I set my chart of accounts, right? Why would I ever want to go in and make changes? Well, there are many reasons for updating a company's chart of accounts, and today I would like to share some of those with you during the presentation. You may have some additional ideas as well, but many times there's just internal growth within your company that is driving new reporting needs, something that wasn't anticipated, you didn't know, and you need to be able to answer questions, and that involves making a change to the chart of accounts to capture that. Reporting changes, maybe just a new board member or somebody says, hey, I'd like to know this bit of information about the organization and their operations. There are obvious reasons why the chart of accounts might need to be updated, such as acquisitions and mergers, even dispositions of companies could cause us to want to make a change to the standard chart of accounts that we rolled out. So what are the options? If we get ourselves into that position and we need to make a change, how do we do that? How do we go about? Well, what are the options? We could keep it the same, and then we could do something like supplement it with analytical accounting or something of that nature. We can supplement that with some additional reporting outside of GP perhaps, and we can obviously overhaul or replace the chart of accounts. We can make changes to it and modify it, or we can completely revamp it. One of the things I want to talk about is what are the practical considerations when you're designing a chart of accounts? What are the things that you need to take into consideration? You need to look at your needs, logistics, cost benefit of doing that, legal requirements, what do you have to report on and to whom? Those are all important considerations. If we could take a look at the next slide. So what are some of the things that can help with the chart of accounts? Well, we have analytical accounting. Some of you may know what that is, some of you may not. We're going to talk about that here in a bit. And I'm happy to report that today, making wholesale changes to the GL chart of accounts in Dynamics GP has never been easier because we now have some tools available to us free. And that is a word that you hardly ever hear us say, but here's an application that is free, and that is the PSTL, or the Professional Services Tools Library. Now, back in the day, it was quite expensive. There are, I forget how many, 30, 40 little applications that enable us to make changes to our database, make changes to the structure of our GP functionalities. And one of those tools we're going to talk about today, and that is the GL Combiner and Modifier. We're going to talk about how we can utilize that to make changes. There's also a GL Trigger, master file trigger, that some of you may not have heard of, and that gives us the ability to kind of replicate that chart of accounts across all of our companies if we're in a multi-company environment. Professional Services Tools Library, please, I would challenge you, if you do not have this installed today, please make sure that you do that. It's free. There's no reason not to have it. We can help you get that loaded. The Professional Services Tools Library has a lot more functionality than what I'm going to talk about today. If you have any questions about it, just reach out to Carolina or anybody, and we'll get that information to you. So the design and development of the segmental structure, that sounds very hoity-toity, doesn't it? But that's just basically saying when we want to make changes, and keep in mind, GP has one of the most flexible account structures in the industry. We allow for a maximum of 66 characters in our chart of accounts. That's a lot. I haven't seen anybody max out yet. I hope I never do. We allow for up to 10 segments in our chart of accounts, and we can match the tracking of activity to the hierarchy of your company in order to report on lines of business, geographical areas, unique entities. So, of course, we need to sit down and think about what is that design, how do we develop what those segments should be from a reporting perspective. And of course, no change is worth the effort if at the end of the day you can't report on what you need to. So we really need to think about financial reporting and other types of reporting as well, but primarily financial reporting, making sure that management reporter is able to set financial statements to report on the segments and the analytical codes, if that's what we're using, to get information to the board, to the owners, to the people who run operations, or whoever the people are that need access to that. So the mapping reporting requirements, really, really important. I can't emphasize enough. You need to sit down and just make a list. What are the things that we have to either from a regulatory perspective, or need to just from reporting to the board or the owners. So let's take a look at the next slide. Yep, let's talk about the basics. So of course, when it comes to the design and development of our segments, obviously it has a very financial focus. Just keep in mind who and what you wish to report. The focus should be on streamlining where possible and keeping the structure as simple as your business will allow. Remember, and I tell people this often, remember, it's not called the general ledger for nothing. Otherwise, we would call it the specific ledger or the detailed ledger. But we call it the general ledger. We're trying to keep that as clean and streamlined, as simple as we possibly can. So if we take a look at the next slide and talk about mapping those reporting requirements, we need to really look at three areas. So we need to consider our present reporting needs, what aspects are being met, which are not. Do you anticipate growth? Will that growth come from new lines of business for which there's no current reporting? Or will it be something that's not even thought of yet in our segmentation? Do remember that Dynamics GP has a plethora of operational reporting options. So Excel reporting, SmartList, SSRS. Not everything has to be reported out of the general ledger. We do have other options available to us. So make sure you understand when something is truly a financial need for reporting purposes and when something's more of an operational. And think about, can I get this out of SmartList, or can I get this out of one of the submodules where that information is being cultivated to start with. So if we take a look at, yes, thank you. If we take a look at PSTL, and again, I can't emphasize enough, it's free. I loved when Microsoft first announced that, and I got to go back and tell people, remember when you wanted this, and I said it cost this much money? It's free now. I love that. It was like being Santa Claus. So overall features of PSTL that we are going to talk about would be the account modifier combiner, which allows us to change an old account number to a new account number, or combine accounts into a single account without manually changing the data. So if I have 2 account numbers and now I'm just trying to streamline my chart of accounts and I really wish I wouldn't have split those into separate accounts, I can actually take the PSTL tool and combine those together, smack them together like a jam sandwich. And the nice thing is that tool, very well written, will actually pull the data from both of those accounts, all that historical data, and map it to the new account, whichever one we pick as the master account. The other account will roll into it. It's as though it never happened. So you will see all of the history. You don't have to go in and do journal entries after the fact. The system takes care of that for you. Do keep in mind, and I think I talk about this later on in the presentation, but do keep in mind that with the PSTL, you always make a good backup before you do that. And you always make sure that security is locked down for that. You don't want anybody in there willy-nilly able to make important decisions like that or to alter your data in a way that perhaps you do not want. So be sure, we always do backups before. We always run it in a test company before. Make sure that the end result is what we want. We also have in PSTL, if we could go back real quickly, thank you. We also have available to us that master record trigger for the GL, and that enables us to replicate our chart of accounts across multiple companies. So if you're struggling today in a multi-company environment and you add a new account number in one, but it doesn't get added in the other, and you really would like to synchronize your chart of accounts, keep in mind that PSTL has a tool for that. And we also have tools within the finance series that we're going to talk about, including Mass Modify. So if we could, let's talk about analytical accounting. And some of you may have heard of analytical accounting. That is actually a module that enables us to create additional dimensions that are not part of the segments of our chart of accounts. So in other words, we can keep the general ledger very simple without adding any additional segments or any, any additional accounts, but still track things. So for example, if you have a GL account number for trade shows, and that's all that you have, just trade shows, and you do trade shows in a number of different areas across the country, and you kind of like to evaluate which one costs the most or what's the cost benefit of each of those, how would you do it traditionally? Well, you'd create Trade Show Boston as an account number, Trade Show LA as an account number, and if you did 10 trade shows in a year, you'd end up with 10 GL accounts. With analytical accounting, you could just have trade shows, and then you could create a dimension within analytical accounting called trade shows that had codes for each of those cities where those activities would take place. So very, very helpful from that standpoint. It has wizard-driven inquiries. So analytical accounting allows us to pull that information in a number of ways. The navigation is very simplified for analytical accounting, so it's easy to move around. We can set valid code combinations so that we can make sure that people only code things the way that they should. And then we can also work with grant management to set up budgets and have validations against those as well. So all of those features of analytical accounting, if that sounds like something that you would like to investigate, obviously you can reach out to Carolina and she can get the ball rolling on that. Analytical accounting, I didn't mention, but obviously it works with Management Reporter. Management Reporter has the ability to, I think most of you probably know this, but you have the ability to create reporting trees and to have line items that are specific to a division, a department, some segment of your chart of accounts. And if you have AA codes or analytical accounting codes, you also can make that part of your segmentation in Management Reporter. All right, what is next? Oh, so also for analytical accounting, we can do reporting in Excel. We can implode or explode. That just means we can roll it up, roll it down. That integration with Management Reporter with Smart List objects. When you install analytical accounting, there are Smart List objects that are automatically created. And you can create budgets based on the start and end date as well. All right, so for analytical accounting, some enhancements that we also have the ability to do, if we're going to, of course, sometimes we might want to make changes to analytical accounting because our business model has changed. So not just our chart of accounts, but sometimes our analytical codes. And if our business model has changed, we have some enhancements that make our lives easier as far as making changes to analytical structure. So AA Backfiller enables us to populate analysis information for the open year, as well as historical transactions for select journal entries. And AA Changer allows us to change and merge transaction dimension codes. And then, of course, AA Segment Converter allows us to convert GL account segment values to transaction dimension codes. All right, so we are going to see a live demo, and I think, yes, thank you. You should be able to see my screen. So let's take a look very quickly at, and let me just bring it up. Let's talk about Great Plains. So here's my Great Plains 2015. And the first thing I would like to talk about, because many people, if it's been a while since you've implemented GP, or maybe you weren't actively a part of it, you may not be familiar with this. But one of the things that you can do is take a look at your account format and see if you have spaces available or if you built in something into your account format that you can easily make changes. So if you look under administration and under the setups for the companies, because again, our chart of accounts can be specific by company. And if you look, the second option down, because it's very important, so it's up near the top, if I were to look at my account format setup, it shows me when my system was set up, what was the maximum account length that we accounted for and the maximum segments. And then in red and bold, at least in my case, it may be black and bold in yours, but right below that will be what we are actually using out of that total segmentation. So we can always go in there and make changes to these and add account number structures. And again, please don't do this at home. Make sure that you've talked it over with whoever your point person at MIG is, because there are some things that we would want you to take into consideration, and we'll help you through those, through the considerations. So again, this will show me how the account length in total, the number of segments. So you can see I have in my test environment a division, an account number, and a department. And the length of each of those, it's a 3-digit division, a 4-digit account number, a 2-digit department at the end. And the main account segment, of course, is the account number itself. So that's the account format setup. Everybody needs to be aware that that's really what controls your chart of accounts in terms of the segmentation. Also, I would like to talk about PSTL. Again, we mentioned it. We've talked about it a few times. And you may or may not have it installed. So look on your navigation pane. And again, I'll demonstrate this, but if this is scrunched down a bit, you may not readily see it. But grab this little bar and pull up until you can't pull up anymore. And if you do have it installed, it'll be at the generally at the very bottom. Depends on what modules you have installed. So if you click on PSTL, you will get this one box that says PSTL main setup. And then when you click on that, you can see all the different functionalities that you would now have available to you to use. And again, I cannot emphasize this enough. Please, please, please don't go in here and do anything without making a backup first. And I would rather that you did this in the test company first to make sure that the end result is what you were looking for. If you take a gander at the financial tools, you'll see there's a number of them that we've talked about. The account modifier and combiner, it's a great little application. It's worked wonderful. I've used it for many, many years, never had a problem with it. If I click on account modifier combiner, you can see that activates the next button. When I click next, it pulls up a little dialog box that enables me to choose an account number to convert to another account number. So I can say I want account number 6,000 now to be account number 7,000. Maybe I'm just cleaning up my chart of accounts because the previous structure was kind of ugly. So I have the ability to run these types of conversions one after another, clicking the convert. Or if I have a range, I can do that. So I can do a range selection, or I can do an import and pull that from a spreadsheet. Please, I recommend to you, strongly recommend to you, that if you're making changes to the chart of accounts, when you're finished, and obviously you would have made a backup before you started, but I would like for you to also, at the end of this, when you're done making your modifications, the system will spit out a report that says old and new, old and new, old and new for each of those account numbers and tell you what they converted to. Please have a look at that and make sure that it's accurate. If even one of those is incorrect, you'll need to restore from backup and start over again. There is no undo on this. Once you merge things together, there's nothing further that we can do to unconnect those or unmerge those. So you definitely need to have a backup first, and you need to double check that list at the end to make sure that you properly merge the ones that you were looking to merge. So that is the account modifier combiner. And also under the financial series, we have the GL master triggers. And the GL master triggers, if we click next, it has the master database, which is where I'm logged into. So if you're in a multi-company environment, if you're starting in company 1, that's what's going to show here. So obviously, I'm not going to replicate my chart of accounts to myself because it's already there. So it's grayed out, and it shows that as being the master database. So think about that before you log in. Which company is it that you want to be the master, that you will always make the changes to push out to the other companies, and that is the one where you want to set this up at. Once you've logged into that company, then it's just a simple drop down, and you can see all of your other companies listed, and you can choose the company that you want to have replicated. This also includes more than just the GL accounts. You'll see that I have checkboxes here for accounts, yes indeed. So I can choose, let's see, I'm in 2, I'll choose Contoso, and then I can mark for the accounts, but we also can keep vendors and customers in sync with another database. So on the other options, if I click on purchasing, I'll see the vendor GL triggers. If I click on sales, I'll see the customer triggers. I think I said GL triggers, but master triggers, I will see those there. It's the same dialog box that opens for all three of those. So I would check mark that, click OK, and then anytime I add a new GL account to the two companies, kind of redundant there, it will replicate those to the other companies that I have specified here in this list. Very nice functionality for, again, GL accounts and also vendors and customers. So that's the PSTL tool, and if anybody is interested in it or would like some documentation, feel free to reach out to us, or you can Google and say PSTL documentation PDF, and you should be able to grab a copy of that and read up on it. Now, we said that we also had, in addition to the PSTL tools, we had some financial tools available to us to make changes or mass modifications to our chart of accounts. And some of you may have seen this already. Maybe you've seen it as an option, but you've never quite known how to do anything with it. Again, I hope that you have, from a security perspective, have this kind of nailed down a bit. So under Financial, I've chosen Financial on my navigation pane, and under Cards, I have an option that says Mass Modify. And when I click on Mass Modify, it enables me to mass modify my chart of accounts. And it's more than just modify, well, let me say, it's more than just one ability. I also have the ability to do multiple things when I'm in here. So if I drop down the Modify drop-down box, it says Copy, Move, and Activate, Delete, and Update. So I'd like to talk you through a lot of those features and functionalities. Copy allows me to duplicate a range of accounts. And when I say range of accounts, I could duplicate anything for one of my segments. So for example, if I wanted to mask the account number, maybe I wanted to copy from, and I have to remember, I think 100 might be one. If I have a division 100, I can go through and say all of my division 100 accounts, and I don't care what natural account or what division, I want to modify, I want to create a 100. Here, I can pull a range of account numbers. So I could say 100 and do a lookup. So I'll pull 100 through the end of the 100s. So see how if I don't put something in there, I won't get quite the range that I'm looking for. So maybe salaries and wages all the way down to, whoops, if I go back up a tiny bit, and my last one is 9,000. So I'm going to take these account numbers and mask them to, I don't think I have a 110. So basically, I'm taking all of these account numbers, and let me just look. See how my display says all account numbers or selected range? This gives me the quick eyeball to see if there's any of these I wouldn't want to include in the modification. So I look through and say, yep, it's just the 100. If I were to click Modify right here, it would copy all of these account numbers with their descriptions and make them 110. Very quick way. I don't have to have somebody on my staff or maybe myself after hours sit down and key in all of those GL accounts. I don't have to import them. I don't have to do anything crazy like that. I can just copy from an existing division department range to a new one. Very quick, very easy to do. Again, just like the PSTL tools, please, please, please don't do this without a backup. And please, please, please make sure that the security is locked down. You don't want to have anybody, surprise, you just quadrupled your chart of accounts, and maybe that wasn't what your expectations were. One note, although I think you probably know this, but when I make a copy like that, it's only copying the GL master file. I'm not getting any sort of balances or GL account activity or anything like that. I'm just getting a brand new GL account that I can utilize for my new division or department. The next option available to me is the move, and the move allows me to take any accounts that have no balances, no activity, no unposted transactions, and literally move them from one segmentation to another segmentation using the same kind of masking. For all of those, masking is going to be the same. The account description, I can pull that from the existing accounts. I think I said previously for the copy that it would do it from existing accounts. That is the default. I can offer up that it would also add in that account segmentation. So if you want that to be part of the new description, you can do that as well. So it would say something like administration Boston cash account, something along those lines, or salary and wages for Boston if I wanted to. The default is existing accounts, and that's typically how I do it. So that's the move feature. I also have the ability to inactivate. And you can see that when I change that, I got this to pop up. So I can only do zero balance accounts, or I can do all accounts within a particular range. So if I still had activity, I could leave that as active. If I needed to do a journal entry or something like that to move balances, I could just quickly go in and activate the zero balance account. And that makes it very nice if you're trying to clean up, in particular, your chart of account. We also have the ability to, if I drop down this list, delete. And this is my least favorite because I do not want to get a phone call from anybody that says, hey, I just deleted a bunch of stuff I didn't want to. Now, keep in mind that the delete rules for just a regular GL account will still apply here. So you can't have a balance, there has to be no current activity, no history for that account number, no unposted transactions, and so on. So you're not going to be able to just go in there and delete a bunch of things that have history and have information, but you could certainly delete some things that maybe you didn't want to do. So please, again, be sure that that's what you want to do. And then we do have an update feature, and you might wonder what that is all about. But notice that when I clicked on update, this section over here became active. And if you remember, in the chart of accounts maintenance, we have an option that says sales, inventory, purchasing, payroll, depending on what you're using, and what the level of posting for that series to the general ledger happens to be. Do you post in detail or do you post in summary? Now, I have had people set it one way during implementation and then later said, yeah, I kind of changed my mind. Maybe I didn't want as much detail as I thought, or vice versa. A real quick way to go in and make that change across all of the chart of accounts is simply go in and choose the modify option for update and then change it right here. So that's a quick look at the mass modify chart of accounts. So we're going to choose the range of accounts that we wish to replicate or make changes to, and then if it's something like, for example, copy, the masking might be available to us that we can take this and replicate it to be the same account numbers but for 110. And of course, once I've chosen everything, the modify button will go and create those changes for me. The mass modify chart of accounts, it's been around a while, good little feature, but again, please, please, please don't mess with them. All right, so let's, if we could, jump back over to our presentation, and I'll ask that Augustina pulls that back up, and we'll talk about some of the issues to avoid. Here we go. So what are some things that we need to look out for? First off, don't have too many GL accounts. Again, going back to my comment about it's not called the specific ledger, it's called the general ledger. So it's very easy for accounts to grow over time, and especially if you have people putting data in that aren't maybe trained accountants, they might add new accounts or do whatever. Too much detail in the selling and general and administrative expenses. Don't have too much detail in there unless you really, really have to have it. Make sure you do have enough detail in the revenue and cost of goods sold. Now, I'm not picking on these two classifications, just to be picking on them. It's just that historically, people have more questions about what's driving our revenue, what's causing our cost of goods sold to increase. Remember when gas prices went through the roof and suddenly cost of sales because of freight, if freight was included in that calculation, people are like, what's going on? Why are the prices going up? It's just that those are the areas that typically people want the detail in, and not so much on the selling and administrative expenses. Do make sure that your cost of goods sold is aligned with your revenue so that you can do those gross margin comparisons across. Please make sure there's logic in assigning your GL account numbers. It's fine if you want it to be willy-nilly and you just remember it, but when you go into Management Reporter, you need to be able to pull together ranges of account numbers, and if you do not have a good logic, it makes it more difficult. You have to do onesies and twosies and exclude or include information. Please make sure that you have really good descriptions or titles on your GL accounts. Make sure you have adequate detail in your chart of accounts. So again, don't have too many, don't have too few, and that changes over time, and I'm sensitive to that. You may have to make revisions along the lines. Make sure that for the departments, product lines, regional growth, make sure that your strategic plan, whatever that happens to be, for managing growth and profitability by your major categories is aligned with your chart of accounts. Make sure that's built in. If we could take a look at the next slide. Obviously, we want the chart of accounts to relate back to the pricing model. And we need to use the chart of accounts for job costing purposes. And here's a big one. This is really big. Make sure that you have a standard chart of accounts for your different companies. Now, you don't have to, and I have plenty of clients who don't because of mergers, acquisitions, and so on. But if you can at all, it's just much easier for you to maintain and create your Management Reporter reports if your chart of accounts is standard across all the companies. Then you can just say, well, telephone is account number 6050 for all my companies, and you just put that in for the row. You have a line for telephone expense, you say 6050, and you're done. Whereas if it's 6050 in one company, but it's 4,999 in another, and maybe an entirely different size in a third company, it just makes it more cumbersome. You have to juggle all those charts of accounts and look across. Just if you can, standard is best. Don't have too many digits in your chart of accounts. 1, it has to be keyed in. 2, it's just longer and messier. Please avoid not using a numbering system. So, for example, if you want to have alpha, obviously you can do that, but it just makes it much more difficult for sorting purposes and ease of use. So try to use the standard if you can. 1 is asset, 2 is liabilities, 3, and so on. So that just makes it easier for everybody. So that numbering system and not using an alpha chart of accounts if you can. I know there are some people who do and some people who like it, but it is a little more cumbersome. being accountants, we like numbers, obviously. And then the other issues to avoid is please don't leave gaps in the numbering system, just from audit trail perspective or just general cleanliness. If we could look at the next slide. So what are the best practices? What did we talk about earlier? We said segmentation, or the different segments of your chart of accounts, should capture key areas of your business model. So it really needs to be focused on financial needs, less so on operational, provided that the operational needs you can get from other areas, other reporting areas within GP. The segmentation should be lend itself to a roll-up concept. So for example, if you have a multi-company environment, you want to be able to roll up to a single consolidated, perhaps consolidated with elimination journal entries, and then from there maybe it rolls down to division, to the companies, and then from there to divisions and departments and so on. So if the segments favor that, it makes it a lot easier for you on the back end when you're reporting. The chart of accounts should follow a standard numbering system. I think everybody agrees with that. And it needs to be flexible so that future business needs can be met. So when I looked in the account format during the live demo, you saw that even though I'm only using 9 digits of my chart of accounts today, 45 were built in so that I could add extra segments, have spaces available for them. The numbering of the chart of accounts should be expandable so we can incorporate additional values, so divisions and departments and so on might have some growth or might have some acquisitions. Make sure the chart is designed so we can properly close to a segment if that's needed. We didn't really talk about that too much, but many of you have probably seen during the year-end close, it is possible to close to a retained earnings account that is a particular segment. And of course, the creation of the chart of accounts should be based on your reporting needs and your requirements. And again, those are going to change over time. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's really the primary focus. So you need to look at what are my current needs and possibly what would be my future needs. And I think that brings us to question and answer, and I've taken it right up to 12 o'clock, so I apologize for that. But do we have any questions? If you have some, please post those on your webinar little side panel. There's a section for questions we pointed out at the very beginning. I'll wait a few minutes and see if any questions come up. Happy to answer those. If you think of something later on and you want to reach out to MIG to ask, feel free to reach out to Carolina and say, I thought of something later, I didn't ask it during the webinar. No questions yet?
Looks like if we have a couple of questions here, Jackie. So okay. Does the mass modify feature work on allocation accounts? That would be one of the questions.
Very good question. I didn't mention this earlier, but that mass modify chart of accounts applies, yes, to posting accounts, but also to fixed and variable allocation accounts, as well as those statistical or unit accounts. So we can replicate or inactivate, we can do those as well. Because in GP, remember, we actually have 4 different types of account numbers that we work with. Posting accounts are the most common, obviously, but we also have fixed and variable allocation accounts, as well as the statistical. And yes, that mass modify works on all of them. Good question. Any other questions?
And we have another one. Let's see here. Does the GL master record trigger work on all companies, or can you choose which companies to replicate?
Yeah, we can, in that particular drop-down box, we can pick and choose. We do not have to pick all of them. We can pick just the ones that we want. So you start, again, in the master company, whatever you want to be that master copy of your chart of accounts, and then log into the PSTL tool and the drop-down box and select only those companies that you want to have the chart of accounts replicated to. You're not under any obligation to choose all of the companies. You can pick just one or two or however many.
Great. And then we have a question here. What is our email address? If they have any further questions, so I will send that over to you, Kelly. Okay, great. So thank you, Jackie. I'm just going to cover really quick MIG support. MIG support plans are reliable and consistent and support service programs for business and that run Microsoft Dynamics. Some of our support benefits include support with Microsoft Dynamics products, support with any related third-party add-ons, and fixed rates plans. If you guys have any questions regarding that, you can always email us at info@mig.com.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Thanks so much.
Sure. And I think we want to cover the last thing, Jackie, which is actually MIG training. MIG training can be customized to your needs, and some of the training benefits includes various training options. They're available with your support plans, and we have group discounts. Again, you can always send an email and reach out to us, info@mig.com.
Of course. How could I forget about the training stuff? That's my favorite.
Great. And for a survey at the end of this webinar, there's a survey will appear to you guys. This survey is designed to help us evaluate and improve our webinars. So please, if you don't mind, take a few moments to provide us with some feedback. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. I don't know, Jackie, if you'd like to say anything else.
Just a really big thank you. I know here in the Midwest it's a beautiful day outside, so thank you for attending the webinar instead of eating your lunch out in the park somewhere. I appreciate it.